Hey guys, Rob here. In today's video, I want to cover a very serious topic and a very important topic. And whether you like it or not, this topic affects both me and you. Now, over the weekend, you'll have seen something terrible take place. Something so terrible that somebody unfortunately lost their life. And it was the assassination attempt on former US President Donald Trump. You might be thinking to yourself, Rob, you run a business and persuasion channel. Why are you covering this? For good reason, but you're absolutely right. If you've watched any of my previous content, you will see that I react and analyze different gurus, public figures, and influencers. I break down the psychology and the persuasion techniques that they use to keep you under their spell, to help build up trust with you so you eventually buy from them. And I've got good experience doing this. Companies hire me to help them with persuasion ethically, to help them with psychology in their marketing. But what happens when persuasion techniques and tactics are used unethically? What happens when they're not used in a way which helps you with the best outcome, right? What happens when they're used to polarize the nation, to divide the nation, to get everyone really angry at each other and to start hunting common enemies? What takes a normal person living their day-to-day life to wanting to carry out extreme measures? That's what I'm going to talk about today, and that's why it's so important. I'm hoping this video here pulls the lid off and exposes some of the tactics and techniques that different media outlets use to increase clicks, to get more attention on themselves. And I'm hoping, honestly, that by doing this, it helps us unite rather than actually separate and come up with these extreme ideologies. So first of all, let's look at what happened over the weekend. I'm going to show video footage. I'm going to skip over it because obviously it's, a bit sensitive for YouTube, but you'll be able to see what happens.
Look at what happened.
So you can see there, somebody took a few shots at Donald Trump. The bullets flew straight past him, straight through his ear. They were a centimeter away from, hitting him in the skull. I believe the person who was sniping was put down straight away. And unfortunately, like I said before, somebody very sad lost their life who were in the crowd behind him. Very, very sad. What causes someone to take this extreme action? What have they been reading and how have they become so polarized and extreme in their views? That's what we're going to look at next. And remember, guys, we're just looking at the persuasion techniques and tactics here. I live in England. I don't care about the US politics or anything like this, but this is a very important topic to cover to help you protect yourself when it comes to extreme ideologies. So please keep the comments clean. So what we do know is that over the last few years in the US, things have been very tough. There's been increasing levels of political violence on each end. There have been, incidents of assassination attempts, lots of civil unrest. And to be honest with you, the nation is getting increasingly divided, and it's kind of reached this boiling point now. And in a lot of news outlets, which either lean left or lean right, they add fuel to the fire here. Take a look at this article. It's a very important one because they attempt to associate Donald Trump with Hitler, and there's a lot of psychology going on here. The Reich stuff. What does Trump really have in common with Hitler? So they're directly comparing Donald Trump and Hitler. When Trump shared a video that dreamed of a unified Reich if he wins the US election and took nearly a full day to remove it, the most shocking thing was how unshocking it was. Trump has reportedly said before that Adolf Hitler did some good things, echoed the Nazi dictator by calling his political opponents vermin and saying immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, and responded to a white supremacist march in Charlottesville by claiming that there were very fine people on both sides. So do you see how they are associating, once again, Trump and Hitler associating, the key word there, I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in just a second. There's another line here. Trump's incoherent, meandering and zigzagging mode of speech adds to the effect. Trump made more than 30,000 false or misleading claims during his 4 years as president, according to account by the Washington Post. Perhaps the most egregious is the big lie that he, not Joe Biden, won the 2020 presidential election. It was Hitler who came up with the concept, writing in Mein Kampf that the great masses of the people more easily fall victim to a big lie. So this article here is using very strategical words to paint Trump in a light which makes him seem like a bumbling idiot, but also as well strategically associating him with Hitler as well. Now, that is a very important persuasion bias which is going on there. It's actually called association bias. And what association bias is if you take two things and compare them to each other, they will transfer the attributes to each other. So for instance, if you have Kim Kardashian, who releases a brand new lipstick or endorses a brand new lipstick, and we see videos of her using this lipstick, we see her talking about it, she's posting about it on social media. The people who like Kim Kardashian will then start to like this lipstick and then go and buy it as well, because they're like, well, if someone like Kim Kardashian, who is a role model to me, uses that lipstick, then I know that lipstick is really good quality as well, because I look at all the other areas of her life and I really want those areas as well. It's association bias. And that is done in a pretty ethical way, right? But then if you flip it on its head and start comparing public figures such as Trump to some of the most evil people in history, then you started to paint this whole other picture about what this person can be capable of, what type of person they are. And it creates these strong associations in public opinion. And then some people are going to listen to that message and think to themselves, well, think how bad Hitler was. Imagine if somebody got rid of him before he brought all that chaos about, before he brought all this war about, all this suffering, right? And people who are extreme in their beliefs or maybe susceptible to being persuaded at a high level, they are going to take extreme action from this. This is called association bias. There's something also very important which is going on here as well. A lot of different media outlets were also adopting the exact same strategy as well, and that is associating Hitler with Donald Trump. And it's just this terrible sort of thing which has happened because these news outlets, A, they want clicks, but also B, they want you to vote in a certain way. News outlets and media sources, believe it or not, in 2024 are still viewed as authority figures and experts when it comes to bringing you real credible news. There's a large group of people out there who still believe everything that they say, but they don't realize that the North Star, the objective of these different news sources is just to get as many clicks as possible, to incite as much shock as possible. So there's a few things going on there. When you see a source of information as an authority figure or an expert, your compliance to what they say and the believability in what they say skyrockets as well. And a lot of different studies support this. In fact, this is one of the most famous studies into authority bias, and it shows the effect that an authority figure has on the decisions of a normal person. So this is Milgram's shock experiment. And in Milgram's experiment, they had an authority figure who was the experimenter. You can see them here. They had a student who was a learner who was also an actor, and then they had the participant, right? And basically, the participant, who's the real person, had to ask the student questions. And if the student got the questions wrong, they had to administer an electric shock to the person. And these shocks that were administered were just fake, but the person who sat in this teacher seat here didn't know that. And what they found in this study is every time this person, the student here, got a question wrong, they were electric shocked. And if they didn't have an authority figure, the experimenter in there, they would only take the electric shocks up to a certain level before the person was like, you know what, I actually don't want to give this person electric shocks anymore because they sound like they're in pain, even though they're just an actor. They didn't realize they were an actor, and they were like, this person sounds like they're in pain. But when there was a presence of the authority figure who kept telling the teacher to increase the electric shocks, they administered the electric shocks for wrong answers up to a fatal level in most cases. So that means in the presence of an authority figure, normal people would do unethical actions because they trust the judgment of the authority figure. So now if we relate this back to Trump's situation here, we've got all these news outlets who are creating that association bias between Trump and Hitler. And guess what? They're viewed as credible authority sources who people look to for actual real news. So because people view these sources as credible, they just look towards these media outlets and think, you know what, I'm not going to fact check that. That's what that news outlet has said, so that information must be correct. Trump must be similar to Hitler. And so you start to see this pressure cooker now of these negative opinions and how they are persuading people with both authority and the association of Hitler. What I'm going to say next is quite interesting because it shows how news sources have changed over time. A few years ago, I was watching this documentary on Netflix and it was about this serial killer. And basically, nobody for ages knew who this serial killer was, and they were trying to work out the identity. And the reporters were stuck between doing public appeals, using eyewitness testimony to work out who the killer was, but also not disturbing the public. And there was this segment on this clip where the news station was saying, and it was shot in like the 1990s or something like that, they were saying, hey, you know what, we want to find this person, but we don't want to release any footage of what we think the killer looks like or any of the murders that he's done before sort of midday, because everyone's eating the breakfast at that time and we don't want to basically put everyone off the breakfast because we'll get loads of complaints. And I thought, wow, isn't that insane? Years ago, reporters and news media outlets used to actually stop and think about the public and any sort of people from getting upset. But then fast forward to today, and all the media sources actually care about is how can we divide and make the public as angry as possible. But unfortunately, the public, a lot of the public's trust is still the same as it was in 1990, where they watched the news for real reports on what's actually happening. Very, very interesting stuff. Next, what we're going to look at is a persuasion principle called social proof. And social proof is essentially we as herd animals, human beings, look to the decisions and the actions of other people to decide our own actions. For instance, in marketing, we look at client testimonials, we look at reviews. When we go on Amazon to buy a product, we look at all the customer reviews, how many people have bought it, what the star rating is, all that's social proof. We are looking to the decisions of other people to help us make our own decisions. But then let's flip it on its head again when we have big posts on Reddit which are saying Trump is evil, and then hundreds of comments agreeing with how evil it is. It creates this element of social proof. And this allows people who are being persuaded that Trump is an incredibly bad person. Again, I don't know anything about Trump. I'm just explaining what I think is going on, how somebody reaches extreme ideologies. This element of these little forums which go about start this pressure cooker of persuasion techniques. Now we know that he's as evil as Hitler, right? Now we know credible sources are all telling us this, what a terrible human being he is. Now we know there's a lot of other people who think the same as well. Do you see how all these elements basically turn what could be a normal person into a person with pure hatred? I don't know anything about the shooter, by the way. No details have come out at the moment, but I'm explaining how these persuasion techniques can impact just a normal person's perception of things. And here's a really interesting comment by Told for this. The problem isn't the person who lies easily, but the people who believe easily. So one of the very interesting findings out of persuasion and behavioral science is that the group who was being persuaded in the studies all report they weren't persuaded. So for instance, let's just say there's two groups of people. One group of people who is going to be persuaded in a study, and the second group of people who aren't going to be persuaded. This is the control group, right? And in the control group, they get two options that they can pick, right? 50% of people in that group pick option A, 50% of people pick option B. But in the persuaded group, They are all being psychologically persuaded, even though they don't know it, to pick option B. And what happens in that group is 95% of people pick option B and only 5% of people pick option A, because sometimes the persuasion techniques just aren't, effective for a certain group of people in a certain mood. But when they go and interview the group afterwards, who are 95% of them were persuaded to pick option B, they'll ask them, why did you pick option B in this scenario? And the people will often say, well, that's what I wanted to pick. I thought that was the better option. And when they get told that actually part of the study was to persuade them to pick option B, people deny it. They cannot see where they are being persuaded. So this is very important. So basically in life, all these persuasion principles, influence principles, you've probably seen hundreds of adverts all trying to persuade you just today, and they will persuade your choices. But what happens is you will not have taken on board that these adverts are actually trying to persuade you. You will, in your mind, have come to the decision yourself, because it's invisible to typical people unless they realize they are, being persuaded, unless they've seen the science behind it, partly, which is what I'm trying to do with this video here, because once persuasion techniques are exposed, they actually become less effective. And this is why I'm doing this, because when you start seeing hate posts, it doesn't matter which side politically you're on, or which side on any type of thing in your life that you're on, it could be going for a job interview, it could be closing a business deal. When you see some of these things that are happening to you, you'll be able to identify it and be like, hold on a minute. If I choose that, that's not me, going by my own objective opinion. I haven't come to that decision objectively. We're looking at another Reddit post here, and the title of it is it just me, or does Trump remind you of Hitler? The emotional incitement and blind loyalty he seems to drive. Is a serious topic. So there's a persuasion principle, it's cognitive bias, called labeling. And what labeling is it's kind of like association bias, where, two things are maybe compared or associated with each other, and then the attributes of each swap. Think of the Kim Kardashian example I gave earlier with the lipstick. But then labeling as well is where you label someone as something, and because of that, it's an action from you, they get all those traits as well. So in this example, it's labeling Trump as Hitler-like, and all the horrible, image of Hitler also comes along with it as well. So we can see as well that this person here has also reached the same conclusion as those articles, which shows, how things drip down, how people get persuaded on certain issues. Maybe they had come up with that idea, that opinion themselves, but we'll never know. What Jim Bob Joe wrote, what you're seeing is called the cult of personality. A cult of personality, or a cult of the leader, is the result of an effort which is made to create an idealized and heroic image of a glorious leader, often through unquestioning flattery and praise. Historically, it has been developed through techniques of mass media propaganda, spectacle, the arts, patriotism, and government-organized demonstrations and rallies. A cult of personality is similar to apotheosis, except that it is established by modern social engineering techniques, usually by the state or party, in one-party states and dominant party states. And this person is right when they're talking about Donald Trump. But it works on all sides. You have to understand, the medias are batting against each other. They're trying to argue, because they're trying to be louder and louder and louder. Their points are becoming increasingly specific, increasingly insulting, and are driving up the extremes, the people who will listen to it on each side. But speaking of cults, people who've followed cults and have took part in cults, there's some very interesting psychology that has went on there as well. I'm not going to go into it in detail, I can save that for another video. But basically, they found that in cults, a big part of why they are so persuasive, and we've seen it before, there's been a cult which has got people to commit mass suicide. How on earth do you get a group of people who have a range of IQs to all commit suicide? It's crazy. But if you actually look into the psychology there, the people within that group have often been isolated socially from any external voices which are opposing them. So what does this mean? Well, for people to be highly, highly, highly persuaded, they have to be more sort of vulnerable. And one of the elements of being seen as vulnerable is being completely socially isolated. So they don't have any family or friends to tell them, to snap them out of it, to say, hey, what you're thinking right now is not the right thing to be thinking. In fact, it's actually quite wrong. And cult leaders in the past have known this, so they've, in one incident of a cult, they got everyone to sell their homes, to move to an isolated location, and then donate all the money from their homes to the actual cult, right? So that is a method of why people start taking up cult-like behavior, is isolating themselves from any external voices. But here's what's even trickier. We have these things called cookies these days on the internet. And basically what cookies do is they track your behavior and they see what generally you are interested in. And then they show you either adverts or content which is similar to the previous content that you've seen. So for instance, I like animals, and on Instagram, I generally watch Instagram reels of animals when they pop up. So what does Instagram do? It knows my watch time on these reels are longer. So what does it do? It shows me more and more animal content, which is great because I love animals. Now, let's think about a different scenario. Let's think that you have started to hate a political figure, right? And you don't like anything that they say. So all you watch is content around why this political figure and all the bad things they've done, why they're so evil, etc., etc. So what does, these social media platforms do? They then serve you more and more and more of that content. Then what happens? You open the comment section and you get social proof, because there is a ton of other people who are also in the same echo chamber as you, listening to exactly the same type of content, voicing their own opinions, which appear to be their own, but are actually shared amongst the group. It's social proof combined with the authority, right? Combined with that, what you are seeing, you are actually being just shown it, and it's not part of the whole of the media, right? You're only seeing a specific segment which seems to relate to what you have previously shown interest in. You're not seeing the other side because that's not what you're interested in. So you end up in this echo chamber, which is social proof in it. You end up with this association bias that this is a very, very evil person. And this could work on either side, right? Away from Donald Trump right now. This could work on either side. I'm just using this because it's a great example. You then as well have the authority of media sites who are supposed to just be giving you credible information, but maybe actually they lean left or right, and maybe they are also being funded by a certain political member, right? And then you're suddenly in this echo chamber being social proofed while people are throwing around extreme terms like Trump and Hitler and making those associations there and using that labeling bias. And then suddenly you've consumed that for days. You now truly believe that this person is a really bad guy and no one's taking serious action. And particularly, as you've seen with, in Germany, how Hitler was with everyone, this guy needs to be taken care of. And this is all my theory, but from behavioral science, it's actually quite easy to explain this, and how isolated individuals lacking exposure to diverse viewpoints are more vulnerable to extreme ideas and therefore extreme manipulation and extreme actions as a result of the manipulation, as a result of the ideas as well. So this is why in 2024, and this is what I hope my channel does, to be honest with you, this is kind of one of the aims of it, is to help you with critical thinking and, looking at things from a point of view where you aren't afraid to stand back and be like, hold on a minute, I'm in a room full of a group of people who all think a certain way. Is that the right way, or is it the fact that everyone's just kind of bouncing off each other and they're getting social proofed into this and they don't really have, some real reasoning behind their thoughts? Instead, they just seem to be maybe copying each other, or, something's going on here. That's what I'm hoping this video will do. Now, we know now that probably from this act that's happened, a bunch of things are going to happen. Donald Trump is in an incredibly strong position now to win the election. He's probably going to take over, to be honest with you, because a lot of people have seen that. A lot of people are very rational. The majority of people are very rational and like, this is absolutely terrible. And now they feel sorry for Donald Trump and that he has to put up with all this stuff. So that's one thing which could potentially happen from here. Number two as well, we know that there was some sort of extreme person under it, likely extreme, persuasion to go through with this act. But I can already see conspiracies coming up about, well, you know, this was all a planned attack from the other side, which is exactly the opposite, well, the same, but on the opposite side as comparing Trump to Hitler and things like this. So what's going to happen now? Conversations like that are no doubt going to inspire someone on, you know, Trump's side to do some sort of act, right? And we're probably going to see that in the next few weeks. Will this be the final event? I don't think so. That's just not how people work. But then again, it's going to cause even more, you know, political violence and even more division and things like this. So that's something to watch out for. What a strange time to be in, right? But that's my theory on why a person can be driven to extreme measures. And I hope that you guys remember to keep the comments nice underneath with each other. If you want to discuss things with each other, keep them nice, please do. You know, I hope that this was of some value to you, and I hope that, you know, we've managed to explain a little bit about what's going on here and what I think are some of the cognitive biases and persuasion techniques which are impacting on certain people. And, you know, it impacts on the people in the you know, middle of the spectrum, but then you've got the extreme people at either ends of the spectrum who are maybe under the right conditions, who have maybe had the right type of upbringing, they've got the right type of personality traits to be very, very susceptible to carrying out extreme measures here. And I hope, you know, when you watch this video, you can identify out there where extreme sort of persuasion techniques, manipulation techniques are happening to you. Because I think it's absolutely terrible, to be honest with you, that when I was scrolling through this, doing a little bit of research for this video and how I could explain it, like I have all that stuff hidden on my browser. Like I am not interested in this stuff. I have a YouTube blocker. I have like social media blockers, so it just keeps me focused. I'm a little bit ADHD, and that's really why I do it. But when I took those, you know, took those protections off and I started to see all the news articles, I was like, wow, people were even more divided and even more extreme than I thought they would be going into this video. So massively surprising to me. But let me know what you guys think of this. You know, let me know if you think, how you think things are going to go. Let me know as well. Is there anything I've missed here? Did I cover it all? I'm always open to listening and learning from you guys as well. You know, we're all a community here. We all like each other. I've got some very smart people who are part of my subscribers. But thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have a good day, and I hope you stay positive and don't let things like this get to you. I hope you are able to identify when the source is trying to manipulate you and things like this. And take it easy. See you in the next one.